Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. Lightning crackled across crystalline dunes, each strike turning sand to glass with a sound like breaking bones. Devis rappelled faster, his carbon fiber line singing against the rock face while charged particles made his teeth ache. The mangled alien craft below sparked violet blue, its hull peeled open like rotten fruit. A child's scream cut through the howling wind, high, desperate, absolutely not human. "Hold on, just hold on." The words came unbidden, dragging memories with them. Another child, another crash. Kepler Station's emergency klaxons wailing as he'd reached through twisted metal, fingertips brushing a small hand just as the fuel cells. No, not now. Devi dropped the last 10 meters, his boots crunching into glass-sharp sand. The hauler groaned, listing further into the ravine. Through a tear in the hull, he saw her, a child with skin like twilight and hair that moved like liquid mercury in the charged air. Her throat blazed with bioluminescent marks, patterns he didn't recognize but understood perfectly. Terror, pain, please help me, written in living light. "Easy, easy," he called, though she probably didn't understand standard. The hauler shifted, metal screaming. 30 seconds, maybe less before the whole thing went. The storm smell hit him, ozone and hot copper, the particular stink of cooking electronics. "I'm coming." The child's eyes, silver as her hair, locked onto his. She stopped screaming. Devis wedged himself through the hull breach, edges tearing his jacket. The interior reeked of leaked coolant and something else, something organic and wrong. The pilot, an adult version of the child, violet-skinned and motionless, slumped over controls that sparked and hissed. Dead. The child was pinned beneath a collapsed strut, her left leg bent at an angle that made his medic training scream. "This is gonna hurt," he warned, pulling his emergency kit. The carbon splint snapped out, adjustable and light. The child watched him work, those silver eyes tracking every movement. Her throat marks dimmed from panic bright to something softer, trust, maybe, or shock. Thunder rolled overhead. The taste of copper intensified. The splint clicked into place just as the hauler's power core began its death whine, a rising pitch that meant 15 seconds to critical. Devis scooped the child up, her weight nothing compared to the adrenaline flooding his system. She made a sound, not quite a whimper, and her small fingers clutched his torn jacket. 10 seconds. The exit too far. 5 seconds. He wrapped himself around her, back to the coming explosion, and deployed his heat foil shield. 3 seconds. The child's throat marks pulsed once, bright as a star. 1. The hauler exploded in blue-white fire. 3 days later, the drums started at dawn. Devis looked up from his workbench, servo driver still humming in his hand. The prosthetic arm he'd been calibrating could wait. That sound, rhythmic, deliberate, growing louder, meant visitors, the kind that traveled in formation. Through his workshop's grimy window, the morning sun caught on silver, lots of silver, hair like spun moonlight, braided with crystal shards that sang in the wind. A full phalanx of Valari warriors approached on creatures that looked like 6-legged horses crossed with panthers, their violet-skinned riders moving in perfect synchronization. "Shit," Devis muttered, setting down his tools. He'd known this was coming. Save a Valari child, especially one whose throat marks suggested high caste bloodlines, and the tribe would come calling. He just hadn't expected them so soon, or so many. The lead rider dismounted with a fluidity that made his mouth go dry. She moved like a dancer, if dancers carried glaives and could probably kill you with their pinky finger. Violet skin that seemed to shift between purple and indigo in the light. Silver hair bound in a complex warrior's braid that left her pointed ears exposed, a sign of either confidence or challenge, he wasn't sure which. Her fitted armor did nothing to hide a figure that would have stopped traffic on any world, curves and deadly grace in equal measure. But it was her throat marks that held him. They pulsed in a slow, steady rhythm, hypnotic patterns of bioluminescence that drew the eye and wouldn't let go. She walked to his door, didn't knock, just stood there, waiting until he opened it. "You touched what was ours, human." Her accent rolled over the words like honey poured over steel, melodious and sharp-edged at once. Devis leaned against the doorframe, trying for casual despite his racing pulse. "I saved what was dying." Her throat marks flickered, just once, barely visible, but he caught it. Surprise, maybe. Her eyes, the color of sunset through amethyst, traced the fresh scars on his hands. Burns from the hauler's explosion, still pink and healing. Something shifted in her expression, there and gone. "The child lives because of you." Not a question. She got a name. "Leora Kale, my sister." The warrior woman tilted her head, studying him. The movement did interesting things to her neck, to the way light played across her throat marks. "I am Vireya Kale, hunt captain of the Western Reaches. Devi Cole, engineer, medic when necessary." He stepped aside. "You coming in, or is this whole conversation happening on my doorstep?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You would invite armed Valari into your home. You would have broken down the door if you meant harm. Besides," he nodded to the phalanx behind her, "pretty sure I'm outnumbered." This time her throat marks definitely pulsed. Amusement, he thought. She turned and made a gesture. The other warriors dismounted in unison, the sound of their boots hitting sand perfectly synchronized. "The matron will see you," Vireya said. It wasn't a request. 20 minutes later, Devis stood in the center of the Valari traveling hall, a massive tent that somehow felt larger inside than out. The space smelled of leather and that particular spice the Valari loved, something between cinnamon and copper. Warriors lined the silk walls, their silver hair catching the light from floating biolamps. Every eye tracked him, some curious, some hostile, all measuring. The matron looked ancient and ageless simultaneously, her violet skin darker than the others, almost black-purple. Her throat marks moved in complex patterns that probably conveyed entire speeches. "Devis Cole," she said, her voice carrying despite its softness. "You saved a first daughter. Our laws are clear." "Actually, they're not," Devis said, a ripple of tension through the room. "I looked them up. Your laws say a Valari who saves a first daughter takes the Protector's oath. I'm not Valari." "No," the matron agreed. "You are something more troublesome. You are the first outsider to invoke this law in 3 centuries. Her throat marks shifted to something he couldn't read. "The child claims you lifted burning metal with bare hands to free her. She claims you shielded her with your body. Anyone would have—" "No." Vireya's voice cut through his deflection. "They wouldn't." The matron raised one hand. "The law is complex but clear. You must take the Protector's oath, binding yourself to our tribe, or refuse and be marked as one who abandons children." "That's not—" Devis stopped. Saw the trap. Refuse and insult not just the tribe but the kid he'd saved. Accept and— What? What's this oath involve? Residence in our hall. Strategic counsel in times of conflict. The matron paused. Participation in the choosing right. The tent went very quiet. The what now? A younger warrior, beautiful even by Valari standards, with throat marks that pulsed in rapid, aggressive patterns, stepped forward. Her armor was different, more decorated, suggesting rank. The choosing right, where unmated warriors may offer claim. Her smile showed teeth. Some of us appreciate a male who knows how to use his hands. Saras. Vireya's warning came sharp. You overstep. Do I? Siraz moved closer to Devis, close enough that he could smell something floral on her skin. He should know what he's accepting. The protector doesn't just guard, he can be claimed. Devis looked between them. Sarah's predatory and amused, Virea controlled but tense, her fingers white-knuckled on her glaive. And if I refuse this claiming business? Then you refuse the oath entire, the matron said, and Leora loses her chosen guardian. She has struggled since her mother's death. You are the first she has trusted. Low blow, effective though. I need to clean his wound first, Virea announced suddenly. The ritual requires it. What wound? Devis asked. Virea's blade moved faster than sight. A sting across his palm, shallow, precise. Blood welled. That wound, she said. Several warriors laughed. Come. She led him to a smaller alcove, gesturing for him to sit. Her medical kit looked like a jeweler's case, all crystal vials and silver instruments. She worked in silence at first, cleaning the cut with something that tingled. This'll sting, she warned, then added, the child speaks of you constantly. The storm man who wasn't afraid. She's decided you're a hero from the old songs. I'm no hero. No? She looked up at him, those sunset eyes unreadable. Then why do you carry other scars? Older ones. From other rescues, I think. Too perceptive. This is gonna need stitches. No, we use sealant. But first, she produced a ceremonial blade, made a matching cut on her own ear tip. Blood, darker than human, almost purple. Tradition. The protector's blood mingles with the tribe's. She had to lean close to reach his hand with her ear. Very close. Devis's medic training kicked in, instinct to steady a patient, and he touched her head, thumb grazing the sensitive tip of her pointed ear. The entire tent gasped. Virea went absolutely still. Her throat marks blazed like wildfire, patterns racing across her skin in waves of light. Her pupils dilated until her eyes were almost black. You? Her voice came out breathless. Presume much. I apologize. I didn't. You didn't. She hadn't moved away. His thumb still rested against her ear. That's why I haven't removed your hand. The moment stretched, her pulse visible in those glowing marks, his heartbeat loud enough that she had to hear it, the scent of her, that floral copper mix, making his head spin. Captain! Saris's voice shattered the moment. The matron waits. Virea pulled back, but slowly, letting his fingers trail along her ear. The look she gave him promised. Something. Conversation. Confrontation. He couldn't tell. Back in the main hall, the ceremony proceeded with ritual phrases Devis half understood. But he got the important parts. Protect the child, serve the tribe, accept judgment. What they didn't mention until the end. The choosing rite begins at the next full moon, the matron announced. 3 nights hence, any unmated warrior may offer claim through the traditional proofs. Proofs? Devis asked. Saris's grin turned wicked. Combat, strategy, and compatibility. That last one sounds deliberately vague. It is, Virea said quietly. The feast that night tested every diplomatic skill Devis had. The main hall filled with curious Valari, all wanting to see the human who'd saved a first daughter. They served steklovost, thin-sliced, translucent fish that sizzled on hot glass shards, tasting of salt and citrus. The proper way to eat it involved fingers, apparently, and specific gestures that kept resulting in accidentally intimate touches. Devis had just figured out the rhythm when Saris dropped into his lap. Just dropped. No warning. Positioned herself across his thighs like she belonged there, one arm draped over his shoulders. You're tense, she purred, her throat marks pulsing in patterns that probably weren't appropriate for public. Let me help. She pulled a strand of her silver hair free, long, deliberate movements that drew every eye in the hall. With practiced motions, she began weaving it into his belt. Traditions say you need claiming, her breath hot against his ear. I volunteer. The hall went silent except for the sound of Vireya's knife driving into the obsidian table. Lieutenant Seras honors you with her. Enthusiasm, Vireya said, voice cold enough to frost glass. Seras shifted on Devis's lap, deliberate provocation. The captain hasn't made her intentions known. I have. Your intentions are noted, Devis said carefully, very aware of the politics happening literally on top of him. But unnecessary. Unnecessary? Seras pulled back to look at him, something flickering in her eyes beyond the predatory game. Before he could answer, liquid splashed across Seras's armor. Buramed, the fermented honey wine soaking through the joints. Leora stood nearby, empty cup in hand, silver eyes wide with fake innocence. Oops, the child said in accented standard. So clumsy. Seras hissed, actually hissed, but stood. The wine would stain if not treated immediately. She shot Vireya a look that promised this wasn't over, then stalked out. Leora took her place, though in the chair beside him rather than on him. You saved me, she said simply. Now I save you. That was saving? The child grinned, looking far too much like her sister. Seras is intense. Vireya is better. Oh yeah? Leora pulled something from her pocket, a tiny feather made of metal and crystal. Before Devis could ask, she clipped it to his glove. So she can find you, the child whispered. In the storm. What storm? But Leora was already moving away, leaving Devis with a decoration he didn't understand and the weight of Vireya's stare from across the hall. The matron stood, commanding silence. Devis Cole, you have heard our terms. The Protector's oath binds you to us, but grants you status among us. You would have voice in our councils, protection of our warriors, and... Her throat mark shifted to something sly. Participation in the choosing right, where you might find yourself claimed by one who values your courage. Or fought over by two who couldn't stand each other, Devis thought, catching the tension between Vireya and Seras. You saved my granddaughter, the matron continued, but some question whether an outsider should have interfered at all. Wait, what? Devis stood. You think I should have let her die? Some say, a male warrior called out, that the storm gods chose her fate. You defied them. The storm gods can kiss my... Vireya's hand on his arm stopped him. When had she moved so close? He speaks from grief, she told the hall. His mate died in the same crash. But Devis Cole is right. The storm chooses nothing. We choose. Her fingers squeezed, warning him to stay quiet. I say he has proven worthy of the oath. And I say, Seras returned, armor still damp, that worth is proven in the right, not before. The matron raised both hands. Then let the right decide. Devis Cole, do you accept the Protector's oath, knowing all it entails? He looked at Leora, silver eyes hopeful. At Seras, predatory and damaged in ways he recognized. At Vireya, whose throat marks pulsed in a pattern he was beginning to think meant concern. Another child to protect, another chance to fail, or maybe another chance to get it right. I accept. Vireya's marks flared once, bright, satisfied. She leaned close as the hall erupted in drums and celebration. You have no idea what you've just agreed to, she murmured. Enlighten me later? Her smile was sharp as starlight. Count on it. The storm vault door sealed with a hiss that made Devis's ears pop. 3 hours minimum, Vireya announced, checking the pressure gauges embedded in the crystalline walls. The space measured maybe 8 feet by 6, generous for one person, intimate for two. The emergency thermal blanket folded in the corner looked barely large enough for a child. The white roar's leading edge will pass directly overhead. Outside, the first winds howled, carrying the distinctive crackle of ionized particles. The vault's biolamps dimmed automatically, conserving power. In the reduced light, Vireya's throat marks glowed brighter, painting shifting patterns across the curved ceiling. "Cozy," Devis said, trying not to notice how she had to turn sideways to move past him. The scent of her, that copper floral mix he'd noticed during the ceremony, filled the small space completely. "Sit." She gestured to the padded bench that ran along one wall. "We need to synchronize breathing patterns. In a sealed environment, panic consumption kills faster than suffocation." He sat. She remained standing, studying the atmospheric readouts. Her armor caught the biolamp glow, highlighting curves that her warrior bearing usually made him politely ignore. Not possible here. Not with her hip practically at eye level. "Your breathing is too rapid." She turned to face him, and now they were definitely too close. "You waste oxygen." "Maybe it's not the oxygen levels affecting my breathing." Her throat marks pulsed once, amusement or something else. She reached past him for the emergency kit, her arm brushing his shoulder. The contact sent electricity through him that had nothing to do with the storm. "These help." She produced 2 breathing masks, connected by a single tube. "We call it a charavel, breath sharing. It forces synchronized rhythm." "Looks kinky." "I don't know this word." She knelt in front of him to adjust the mask, bringing their faces level. Her fingers worked the straps with practiced efficiency, but he caught the slight tremor when she had to lean closer. "There. Now me." She sat beside him on the bench. The only way to fit was pressed together, shoulder to hip. The masks clicked into place, and suddenly he was breathing her air, tasting the Bure-med she'd drunk earlier, something sweeter underneath. "Count Invalari," she instructed, her voice muffled but intimate through the shared system. "Da-da-ru, match your lungs to mine." Their chests rose and fell in unison. The recycled air grew warm, humid. Her throat marks began pulsing in time with their shared breathing, and he realized with a start that his heartbeat was sinking too. "Your pulse is loud," she murmured. "Maybe it's echoing yours." The comm system crackled to life. "Captain, his vital signs are spiking." Saris's voice honeyed with false concern. "Should I send medical?" Vireya's eyes never left his. "Negative. The human is adapting." Adapting. Saras drew out the word. "His heart rate suggests vigorous adaptation. Remember, Captain, ear tips are off limits, unless invited." "Noted." Vireya's marks flared. "End channel." The comm went dead. They sat in silence, breathing together, the storm growing louder outside. The vault shuddered as something heavy struck the outer shell. "The roar cadence is wrong," Devis said suddenly, needing to focus on something besides her proximity. He pulled up the atmospheric data on his wrist display. "Look, 17 millisecond repeats. Nature doesn't loop like that." "You think it's fed?" Her body tensed against his. "I think someone's teaching our storm to hunt us." Before she could respond, a massive impact rocked the vault. The masks tore free. Vireya pitched forward, catching herself with hands on either side of his thighs. Their faces ended up inches apart, her breath warm on his lips. Time stopped. Her pupils dilated until her violet eyes were almost black. Her throat marks blazed in patterns he was beginning to recognize: desire, conflict, decision. She leaned closer, just a fraction, and he could taste the charge between them, electric as the storm. "Captain." He kept his voice steady, though everything in him screamed to close that gap. "Protocol?" She pulled back slowly, controlled. "Protocol." But her hand lingered on his thigh a beat too long. "The blanket. We'll need to share for thermal efficiency." They arranged themselves carefully, him against the wall, her between his legs, back to his chest, the single blanket wrapped around both. Pure tactical necessity, nothing more. except her hair spilled over his shoulder like liquid moonlight, and every breath brought her scent, and her throat marks painted desires across the dark. "Sleep," she ordered, though her body remained tense against him. "The storm will pass." He woke to find her hair in his face and her fingers intertwined with his under the blanket. She was already awake, he could tell by her breathing, but she didn't move. "How long?" he asked. 2 hours. The roar's eye is passing. And you didn't wake me. You needed rest, a pause, and you're warm. The admission hung between them. Slowly, deliberately, she turned in his arms until they were face to face in the dark. Her throat marks provided the only light, spelling out emotions he didn't need translation for. "If I bend the law for you," she whispered, "they'll say I wanted to. Then don't bend it." His thumb traced the edge of her jaw, not quite touching. "Break it, for the right reasons." She made a sound, half laugh, half something else. "You don't understand what you're asking. Enlighten me." Instead, she kissed him. The training hall echoed with the song of weapons meeting. "Again," Viraya commanded, resetting her stance. They'd been at this for 2 hours, and Devis's muscles screamed protest. The practice glaive, lighter than her war weapon but still substantial, felt like it weighed 50 pounds. "Your grip is wrong." She moved behind him, fitting herself against his back. Her hands covered his on the shaft, adjusting minutely. "Don't chase balance, become it." Her hips pressed against his as she demonstrated the pivot. The contact was necessary for the technique, also thoroughly distracting. "Feel the weapon's weight," she breathed against his neck. "Let it guide you." He felt a lot of things, most of them inappropriate for training. But he'd learned the dance now, understood the rhythm. In one fluid motion, he reversed the position, using the glaive's momentum to spin her, pinning her wrist with the haft. "Like this?" Her throat marks flared. "You learned too quickly." "I have an excellent teacher." They stood frozen, her back to his chest, his hand over hers on the weapon. The position mirrored how they'd slept in the vault, but vertical, charged with different energy. Her pulse raced under his grip. He could see it in the quickening light at her throat. "Release," she said, though she made no move to break free. "You could make me." "Yes." The word came out rougher than either expected. "I could." From the doorway, someone cleared their throat. Cirrus leaned against the frame, silver hair loose, wearing training leathers that looked painted on. Her throat marks pulsed in slow, deliberate patterns, challenge and invitation mixed. "Don't stop on my account," she purred. "I enjoy watching the captain instruct." Viraya stepped away from Devis, controlled but quick. "Did you need something, Lieutenant?" "Many things." Sarah sauntered into the hall, picking up a practice blade. She spun it expertly, the motion hypnotic. "But right now, private instruction." Her eyes locked on Devis. "Unless the human is too tired." Sarah's, warning in Viraya's voice. "What?" "He should learn multiple styles." She moved closer to Devis, close enough that he could see the faint scars on her throat, just below the marks. Old wounds, deliberately hidden. "My technique is more hands-on." She grabbed his wrist, pulled him into position. Unlike Viraya's controlled instruction, this was pure provocation. She pressed against him, guided his hands lower on the grip than necessary. "See? Different leverage point." Her breath hot on his ear. "Better for close work." Sarah's. He kept his voice gentle but firm, recognizing something desperate under her aggression. "Signal first. Always." She went still. Not the predatory stillness from before, something vulnerable. Her throat marks dimmed. Even in play? The question came out smaller than she'd intended, especially in play. For a moment, her mask slipped completely. He saw what she hid under all that aggressive sexuality, control taken, given back as weapon. Then she stepped away, nodding once. Respect, maybe, or recognition. You want to be chosen or loved? She addressed the question to the air between him and Viraya. There's a difference. Is there? Viraya's response came sharp. Saris laughed, but it held no joy. If you want to be chosen, I can make you a festival tonight. She looked at Devis. But love? Love requires something I'm not sure any of us remember how to give. She left without another word. Viraya stood frozen, staring after her. She's not wrong, Viraya said finally. The choosing right is about possession, display, politics. Her marks dimmed to almost nothing. Not love. What do you want it to be? She looked at him then, really looked. Something impossible. The celebration hall reeked of silver sage smoke and spilled buramade. Devis sat at the engineer's table, studying atmospheric readings on his tablet while around him the Valari celebrated the storm's passing, except it hadn't passed. Not really. The eye wandered in patterns that made no sense, doubling back, circling, hunting. A tech stumbled past and Devis caught something. Brown residue on his fingers. Silver sage, but wrong. Nobody smoked during shift. Unless... Viraya. He found her at the command table, pulled her aside. Your night tech, the one monitoring the storm feeds. He always work alone? Her eyes sharpened. Why? The roar's been learning. Someone's been feeding it data, teaching it our evacuation patterns. He showed her the readings. And your boy's got sage stains. Nobody smokes on duty unless they're meeting someone who does. Before she could respond, the lights failed. Emergency biolamps flared, casting everything in sickly green. Sirens wailed, a rising pitch that sent ice through Devis's veins. Exactly like Kepler. Exactly like when the hull breached and he'd reached for that child's hand and the whole station had... With me. Viraya grabbed his face, forced him to focus on her. You are here, now, with me. I can't lose another... You won't. We won't. She pressed her forehead to his, a Valari gesture he'd seen between family, lovers, battle partners. Her throat marks pulsed against his skin, warm and alive. Real, present, not Kepler. Dadaru, she breathed. Match me. His breathing steadied. The panic receded, but the sirens kept wailing. Syndicate breach in Section 7, someone shouted. They're in the nursery. Leora. Devis ran. The nursery was chaos, children screaming, smoke from breaching charges, syndicate raiders in black tactical gear. Devis saw Leora by the far wall, shielding younger children with her small body. A raider reached for her. No! Devis vaulted a broken beam, tackled the raider mid-grab. They went down hard, rolling through broken glass. The raider was bigger, armored, but Devis fought desperate. He managed to get the helmet off, slammed the man's head into the floor. Run! He shoved Leora toward the exit. Go! She grabbed his glove instead, pressed something into his palm. Feather knows you now. I'll find you in any storm. More raiders poured in. Devis bought time, held the doorway while children fled. A stun baton caught him in the ribs, another across the shoulders. He went down, vision sparking. The last thing he saw was Leora disappearing into Viraya's arms. He woke zip-tied in a syndicate transport, ribs screaming, blood in his mouth. The commander, scarred, human, with dead eyes, smiled at a camera drone. People of the Valari, your human protector kneels before us. He grabbed Devis's hair, yanked his head up. Watch him beg. Go fuck yourself, Devis spat blood. The commander's smile widened. Soon he'll beg us to kill him. Unless you want to trade, the child for the human, you have 1 hour. The great hall had never been so quiet. Viraya stood before the assembled tribe, still in damaged armor from the raid. 3 children saved, 7 taken, including Leora. The memorial spears for the dead, 2 warriors who died defending the nursery, stood fresh in their holders. The syndicate demands a trade, the matron announced. The human for the children. It's not a trade, Vireya said. It's an execution. They'll kill him and keep the children. Then we attack, Sarah stepped forward. Full assault. In the White Roar? An elder warrior laughed bitterly. Suicide. We'd lose half our fighters before reaching them. Then we negotiate. We don't negotiate with slavers. Enough. Vireya's voice cut through the arguments. She walked to Devis's memorial spear, erected prematurely, but tradition demanded it for any taken in battle. From her neck, she removed her battle torque, the symbol of her command, her authority. The hall gasped. She broke it in half. The sound, metal snapping, echoed like a gunshot. She placed one half at the spear's base, kept the other. No victory that costs him is worthy of the Valari. Her voice broke on the last word, throat marks dim as dying stars. I choose him, not as captain, not as duty, as myself. Captain, Saris moved closer. You can't. I can. I choose. Vireya looked at her lieutenant and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. As he chose us. Saris stood very still. Then, deliberately, she pulled the silver braid from her armor, the claim she'd made on Devis. Instead of returning it to her hair, she dropped it in the ceremonial brazier. Silver sage smoke rose, carrying the symbol away. Boundaries matter. Saris's voice carried to the whole hall. His life matters. Let me make this right. How? The matron asked. Saris picked up a captured syndicate drone, examined its sensors. Orich Tech sniffs on pheromone bands. Give them a celebration. Her smile turned sharp. They'll forget the kill. Warriors began striking spears against shields, not in unison, but in rhythm. Heartbeat rhythm. Da-da-roo. The sound built, filled the hall, became a promise. Vireya raised the broken half of her torque. Who stands with me? The rhythm became thunder. In his cell, bloodied but conscious, Devis heard drums in the distance and smiled. The feather mark Leora had given him pulsed warm against his palm. They were coming. The storm was coming. And this time he'd dance with it. Pain brought Devis back to consciousness. Sharp, electric, real. The syndicate holding cell stank of rust and ozone. Outside, the White Roar screamed across glass dunes, making the prefab structure groan. His wrists were zip-tied behind him, shoulders screaming from the position. Blood had dried sticky in his mouth, copper thick on his tongue. The guard outside was arguing with someone over comms. Don't care what the sensors say, there's no mating swarm out here. Devis smiled through split lips. Sarah's had to be. He dislocated his thumb before. Field medic training included escape protocols. Still hurt like hell. He pressed his right hand against the wall bracket, angled just so, and pulled. The wet pop made him bite through his cheek to stay quiet, but his hand slipped free. The feather mark Leora had pressed into his palm pulsed warm, still active, still tracking. The guard's argument grew louder. The drones are going crazy. They think there's 100 Valari in heat out. Shit, what's that smell? Pheromone bombs. Sarah's was magnificent. Devi found the cell's access panel, popped it with his good hand. Syndicate tech was derivative, predictable. He scrolled through subsystems until he found what he needed, the weather kite controls. Every syndicate outpost had them, early warning for storms. But kites could be more than sensors. His thumb throbbed, barely responding, but he managed to access the kite's core programming. Change the carbon fiber tether to conductive mode. Adjust the altitude algorithm. Create a pattern that would... Lightning struck directly overhead. The lights died. Emergency power kicked in, casting everything blood red. The guard cursed, fumbled with his rifle. Devis kicked the door just as the lock cycled to reset. It flew open, caught the guard in the face. They went down together, rolling through scattered equipment. The guard was bigger, armed, but Devis fought desperate. He got his good hand on the rifle stock, used it as a lever, slammed the guard's head into the floor until he stopped moving. Outside, the storm raged apocalyptic. Sand turned to glass mid-air, falling like razor rain. The weather kite bucked against its tether, a metal dragon drinking lightning. 3 years ago, I let fear win. Devis grabbed the kite's control unit, strapped it to his chest. The tether would either hold or it wouldn't. Not tonight. He looked up at the roiling clouds, at the ion discharge painting the sky purple-white. Come on, dance with me. He hit release. The kite yanked him skyward just as Valari war riders crested the nearest dune. Flying through an ion storm on a jury-rigged weather kite redefined several levels of stupid. Lightning struck the kite twice in the first 30 seconds. The carbon fiber frame dispersed most of it, but enough reached Devis to make his teeth ache and his vision strobe. The tether had become a live wire, and his barely functional thumb couldn't maintain proper grip. Every gust threatened to tear him loose, but from up here, he could see everything. The Syndicate base sprawled below, 3 buildings around a landing pad where a heavy transport waited, engines hot. The children would be there. Had to be. To the west, Valari riders flowed like silver water between the dunes, Virea's war banner streaming. They were using the graphene tethers he'd suggested, grounding themselves against the storm's fury. The Syndicate drones buzzed confused patterns, sensors overloaded by whatever pheromone cocktail Syrahs had deployed. They kept clustering and dispersing, targeting ghosts. A gust slammed the kite sideways. Devis's grip slipped. He caught himself with his bad hand, thumb screaming just as lightning struck again. This time, he was ready for it. He angled the kite, used the discharge to paint a targeting pattern across the sky, a giant arrow pointing at the transport. Virea saw it. Even from this height, he caught the blaze of her throat marks as she raised her glaive. The Valari charged. Syndicate troops poured from buildings, setting up defensive positions. Pulse rifles against traditional weapons should have been a slaughter, but the storm was changing everything. The ion interference made targeting systems useless. The Valari rode the lightning itself, silver hair streaming, throat marks blazing like stars. Devis fought to maintain altitude, to keep painting targets, but the kite was dying. Each strike weakened the frame. His thumb had gone numb, then passed numb to white-hot agony. The tether started to fray. Below, he saw Saras break from the main force. She'd discarded most of her armor, wore something that caught the wind, billowed like smoke. As she rode, she pulled canisters from her belt, lobbed them at drone clusters. Pink-purple clouds exploded, and suddenly the drones went insane. Not just confused, but actively pursuing each other, ramming, self-destructing in aerial orgies of confused programming. My body, my choice. Her war cry carried even over the storm. My victory. But a Syndicate sniper had drawn a bead on her, laser sight cutting through the chaos. Devis didn't think. He dove. The kite folded, tether snapping. Everything suddenly free-fall and chaos. He hit the sniper at terminal velocity, both of them tumbling down the prefab's roof. The sniper's neck snapped on impact. Devis kept rolling, caught a drainage pipe, nearly tore his arm out stopping. Saras looked up, saw him hanging there, and her throat marks did something he'd never seen, spelled out what looked like genuine gratitude. Then the transport's cargo door opened and children started screaming. The Syndicate commander had Leora by the hair, plasma knife at her throat. "Stand down or she dies," his voice boomed through speakers. "All of you." Virea's glaive took his hand off at the wrist. She'd come through the wall, literally through it, riding her mount at full gallop through prefab aluminum like it was paper. The commander screamed, stumbled back. Leora twisted free, ran toward the other children huddled in the transport's hold. But the real threat was already moving. The tech from the night shift, the one with sage-stained fingers, had been waiting in the transport's upper level. He dropped through the maintenance hatch, some kind of dead man's switch in his hand. "The old laws return today," he said in accented Valari. "No humans, no weakness." He pressed the switch. The transport didn't explode. Worse. Its cargo clamps released, and the entire hold section packed with children began sliding toward the storm glass cliff. A deadfall trap. The weight of the separating hold would pull everything over, crush anyone beneath. Devis ran, his burned hand useless, his good hand barely better. The hold section groaned, tilted. Children screamed. He got his shoulder under the leading edge just as it passed the tipping point. The weight was impossible. His knees buckled immediately. A 5-year-old's hand slipping through his fingers. Kepler station coming apart. "I've got you. I've got—" But he didn't. He never did. Not this time. He straightened his legs, teeth gritting so hard one cracked. The hold lifted an inch. 2. Children started crawling free, but there were too many, too slow. His vision went red, then black at the edges. Then Virea was there, adding her strength to his. Then Sarah's, blood streaming from a scalp wound. Then other warriors, all of them together, holding the impossible weight while children escaped. Together, Virea's voice in his ear. Always together. The last child cleared, Leora, dragging a smaller boy. They let go. The hold section tumbled over the cliff, taking half the landing pad with it. Devis's legs gave out. He would have followed it over if Virea hadn't caught him, pulled him back from the edge. They collapsed together, her on top of him, both gasping. Blood ran from his nose, his ears. Something inside had torn. He could feel it. Virea's hand pressed his chest, came away red. "Breathe with me." She was crying, he realized, tears cutting tracks through storm dust on her violet cheeks. "Share my breath." She lowered her face to his, not quite touching, sharing the same air. No masks, no protocol, just desperate intimacy. Her throat marks pulsed against his neck, trying to regulate his failing rhythm. She turned her head, bringing her ear close to his mouth. "Almost," she whispered, "when we choose, not just survive." He wanted to respond, but darkness was pulling him down. The last thing he felt was her lips, not quite touching his, breath becoming breath, keeping him tethered to life. Devis woke to singing, not the ethereal harmony he expected from the Valari, but something raw, rhythmic, war songs and work songs blended together. He lay on something soft, a proper medical bed, and his right hand was completely wrapped numb from painkillers. "Don't move." Virea's voice close. She sat beside the bed, still in damaged armor, silver hair loose and tangled. Beautiful. "You tore half your musculature lifting that hold. The medics rebuilt what they could, but—" He tried to flex his thumb. Nothing happened. "Nerve damage," she confirmed. "The burns from the tether, the strain. You may not regain full function." "Worth it." Her throat marks pulsed. "Yes." Through the medical tent's walls, he could hear celebration building. Drums, but different from before. Softer, more complex. Virea stood, began removing her armor. Not suggestively, practically. Each piece set aside with ceremony. "The tribe has been talking," she said, "about laws, about choosing, about what it means that a human acted more Valari than some Valari. The mole? Contained, alive, per the new suggestions." She pulled something from her belt pouch, half of her broken command torque. He believed in the old ways, that strength meant taking, that warriors claimed rather than chose. And now? she smiled. Now we have Sarah's drafting something called the Warden Protocols. Consent culture, she calls it. She says you taught her that her body could be a weapon without being a wound. Through the tent flap, Devis could see the great hall being prepared. Banners hung differently, lower, more accessible. The memorial spears had been moved to the edges, making room for something else in the center. "Can you stand?" Vireya asked. He could, barely, leaning on her. She was careful with his injured hand, supporting him on his left side. They walked slowly toward the hall, and with each step, the singing grew louder. The entire tribe had gathered, warriors, elders, children, all arranged in concentric circles with an open space at the center. But instead of the formal ranked positions he'd seen before, families mixed with warriors, children sat on shoulders, casual, communal. Sarah stood near the center, a new kind of armor, lighter, more decorated with consent marks, symbols he didn't recognize but somehow understood. She'd been wounded in the fight, a vibro scar across her collarbone, but she wore it uncovered, proud. Leora ran to them, threw her arms around Devis's waist, careful of his injuries. "You came," she said in improving standard, "through the storm." "You marked me," he replied, showing the feather still somehow clipped to his ruined glove. "How could I not?" The matron appeared, but not in her formal robes. She wore something simpler, more practical. In her hands, not a staff of office, but a simple cloth. "Devis Cole," she said, voice carrying without shouting. "The tribe has spoken. The old laws are acknowledged but incomplete. You saved not just my granddaughter, but our understanding of what protection means. It is not possession. It is not claiming. It is choosing to stand when standing seems impossible." She gestured to the open space. "If you are willing, if you consent, we would hear your choice." Devis looked at Vireya. She hadn't moved, hadn't presumed, but her throat marks told everything: hope, fear, love, all of it written in living light. "I need help," he said, raising his bandaged hand. "Can't braid one-handed." Vireya's marks blazed like sunrise. She stepped forward, began unwinding a length of her silver hair, not the ceremonial minimum but a long section, intimate and personal. Her fingers worked carefully, weaving the strands into his armor where the chest piece met the shoulder. "I offer more than claiming," she said, loud enough for all to hear. "I offer choosing, daily, repeatedly, in storm and calm." When she finished, she did something that made the entire tribe gasp. She tilted her head, exposing the delicate point of her ear, the most intimate gesture in Valari culture, an invitation that could only be given, never taken. Devis's good hand trembled as he raised it. The crowd held its breath. He cupped her face gently, thumb barely grazing the sensitive edge of her ear. Her throat marks went supernova, patterns of light that painted the walls with color. "I choose you," he said. "Not by law, not by custom, by will. And I choose you." Her voice broke beautifully on the words. "My equal, my match, my storm dancer." She closed her hand over his, holding it against her ear. A small violation of traditional distance, but the tribe had moved past tradition. They were writing new laws now. They kissed as the hall erupted, not the formal applause of ceremony, but real celebration, whooping, laughing, children shrieking with delight. Sarah's started a chant that others picked up, something about storms and choices and the courage to change. When they finally pulled apart, Vireya smiled against his mouth. "I'll be your thumb," she murmured, "storm dancer." "And I'll be your ear," he replied, glancing at the sensitive tip that still made her throat marks pulse. She laughed, bright and free. 6 months later, the training ground rang with the clash of practice weapons and laughter. Devis stood at the edge, his rebuilt hand still weak but functional enough to hold a training glaive. The prosthetic thumb Vireya had helped design, a fusion of human engineering and Valari biotech, responded smoothly to his thoughts. Not perfect, but his. Across the field, new protectors trained. Not just Valari now, but a mix. Human engineers who'd come to study the Stormglass formations, a few Orcs deserters seeking redemption, even a delegation from the ice cavern tribes of the northern reaches, all learning the dance of protection. The choice of standing when standing seemed impossible. "Your stance is still too wide," Vireya called to one trainee, then demonstrated the correction. Her silver hair caught the light, the section braided into Devis's armor dancing with her movement. She'd never taken it back, adding to it sometimes, weaving their lives together strand by strand. Sarah supervised the consent protocols, her new role as Warden of Bounds giving her purpose beyond conquest. She moved between training pairs, adjusting, teaching, occasionally demonstrating how to turn vulnerability into strength without losing yourself in the process. "Boundaries are not walls," she was saying. "They're bridges. You choose who crosses." Leora had grown 3 inches and developed an annoying habit of beating Devis at strategic games. She sat on his good side, narrating the training for the archive she was keeping. "They say storms choose their dancers," she said into her recorder, her standard almost perfect now. "But that night, 2 dancers chose each other. The human who saved me didn't just rescue one child. He taught our tribe that strength isn't taking, it's choosing, and being chosen in return." A storm was building on the horizon. They came regular now, every few weeks. But the tribe no longer fled them. They learned to read the patterns, to ground the lightning, to dance with the wind, to choose their battles instead of being chosen by them. "Storm tonight," Vireya said, joining them. She leaned into Devis's good side, casual intimacy that still made his heart race. "Want to dance?" "Always," he replied. In the distance, storm glass chimes sang in the rising wind, a melody of danger and beauty intertwined. The sound of a world changed not by force, but by choice, by the courage to save a child, by the wisdom to let that saving transform everything. "I came to this world running from failure," Devis said quietly, watching the new protectors train. "And I was running from feeling," Vireya added, her throat marks pulsing contentment. "But we found something better." "What's that?" She smiled, took his rebuilt hand in hers, careful but unafraid. "We found each other." The storm glass sang louder, welcoming the dance to come.